Okay, it's hard. It's hard to really not kind of be happy about this story because again, this has been going on since March, 106 days since this all took place. This is Ever Given right now. She is underway from the Suez, from Port Said, heading westward. She's heading for the Straits of Gibraltar, and right now is showing an ETA into Rotterdam on July 25th. And amazingly, if we hit their past track, it's not her floating around in Anchorage. She's actually up and moving. You'll see her right there on the track line, being able to move right there. Just a big event for her to go. A couple of things to note about her, too. I'll say a couple of things right now on her. She is not traveling very fast. She was doing, last time I looked at her, she was doing about a speed of about 10 knots. And so she's not breaking any speed records here for a couple of reasons, I think. And I'm not sure what the primary one here is. Number one, availability at the terminal in Rotterdam. Rotterdam right now is full. So there's no reason to get there early if they're not needed. So why not slow steam there, save fuel, and minimize costs? The other reason is potential damage to the vessel. We know she took damage up forward. We know she damaged her forepeak. We know she had taken water forward. She was down by the bow, listing the port. Not as much when she departed, but still that issue is there. And so they may want to minimize the speed, the force they put against that hull, especially the forward section of the hull. I guarantee you they're monitoring that. There's probably sensors going in the voids to make sure that there's no catastrophic losses or leaks at all. But she has departed and is on track now heading for Rotterdam. A couple of stories here. This is the Splash 24/7 story by Sam Chambers. Ever Given departs Port Said, set to reach Rotterdam 110 days later than originally scheduled. So that's an amazing number right there. That is a long amount of demurrage, of being late. Big question, obviously, going on here. There's a couple of things going on here that we need to be discussing and talking about here. So right here in the story, they made this agreement, but again, we don't know the details of the agreement. No one is saying how much money has been handed to the Egyptians. It's anywhere from 150 million to 550 million. You know, a give or take of 400 million is quite much, unless you're Sir Richard Branson, you can fly in space. But for most of us, that's a lot of money, and the question is how much it is. But as you'll see, I don't think the issue is as big as they tend to think it is. So she's out. She is heading up there right now. The story kind of details that. This story right here talks a little bit more about it. This is the New York Times story. The ship that blocked the Suez Canal is moving. There was some erroneous reports that she had left early. She hadn't. She got out of the Great Bitter Lake, went to Anchorage off Port Said, and had to wait for surveys to be more extensively done on her in deeper water. And they certified her to be safe in the lake, but they did not certify her for ocean travel, and that was the big issue. And so her classification agency, the ABS, the American Bureau of Shipping, had to get in there, certify her. They also had to make arrangements for where to go in. She's going to go to Rotterdam now, potentially offload her entire cargo or a good majority of it. And then the big question is, what shipyard does she go into? She's going to need a shipyard to do it. New York Times story, again, this is a brief story. It's not a huge one on it. Just talks about it in some detail, the events here, what's going on behind the scenes. Talks a little bit about the owners of the vessel, Shoei Kisan, Keisha, the ship's owner, subsidiary of Imbari Shipbuilding. This is an interesting story. I'm going to talk about this in a second. The way these vessels are built, you'll see a lot of ships built in Japan, Korea, and China. 94% of the world shippings are built over there in the Far East. About 90% are built in those three countries, and the 4% if you had Philippines in there. But one of the deals that the shipyards make to give very low cost, you'll see the very, I mentioned before the cost of this vessel about $160 million. One of the reasons for the low cost of that vessel is the ownership retains with the shipyard. The shipyard is actually building the vessel and then actually leasing it to a firm like Evergreen. So the shipyard makes money off the vessels. And they usually own the vessels for a set period of time and then transfer the vessel to the shipping company. That's a very unique deal you see going on. It's fairly within the past 10, 20 years, I believe, really become more commonplace we see. And Imabari has been doing that for quite a while now. So it's actually the shipyard that owns this vessel. That's why you see the Japanese playing such a big role in this, even though she's Panamanian flagged and Taiwan company with a German operating company and then a Indian crew and an American classification society. You see this. Details of the settlement have not been released by the UK P&I Club. The P&I Club, the Protection Indemnity Club, they own they don't own the cargo. They insure the cargo. They're the ones who brokered this deal really with the Suez Canal Authority. They said they've been focused on reaching a fair and amicable settlement and have worked closely with the Suez Canal Authority to finally find consensus. We don't know what that consensus is. I'm dying to know the consensus of this. There was an interview done by Lloyd's. Richard Mead, excellent reporter for Lloyd's, did an interview with the head of the Suez Canal Authority. It's an amazing interview. Of course, the head of the Suez Canal Authority, Robbie, basically blames it on the ship and the master, not on his pilots, even though we know the two pilots were arguing and fighting on board and there were high winds involved. So we're still not getting an answer. I love this image. This is one of my favorite images that I've seen come out recently. Really gives you the scope and the scale and the size of this. Remember, each of those little squares are 8 feet across, 8 to 8.5 feet high. And that's the same thing you see going up and down highways all the time. And there's, I believe, 23 across here on Ever Given. Gives you the scope and scale of the size of this vessel. So this is the story that came out. This is out of Nikkei Asia. Suez Canal compensation, no impact on Ever Given owners. So the owners took to the airwaves in Tokyo to talk about this, and I love this story. They talk here, earlier this year resulted in a blockage, key shipping route. They said on Monday the insurance will cover to some extent the compensation is paid out. The company held a press conference where Yukita Higagi, president of Imbari and its affiliate, Shoei Kisan, told the reporters that the accident will have no major impact on its earnings. So whatever it's paying out, it can afford to pay it out, it sounds like. And again, this is a really interesting aspect here. There was a point they were getting to, again, 100 and something days they've been. At what point does the Egyptians holding this vessel cost the company, the insurance, more money than it's saving? They didn't want to pay more than the vessel was worth. But after a while, right now, in the super high markets that are going on right now, the demand for container ships and container spots is phenomenal. If you lose out on having a 20,000 box vessel out of service, you're losing untold millions of dollars. Goes on here. The size of the settlement has not been disclosed, but the Suez Canal Authority had claimed $550 million in compensation, while Shoei Kisan initially made a counteroffer of $150 million. And again, we're not seeing what this answer is. So we will have to see what's happening here. We just don't know the final answer. But another story came out literally at the same time, and this is out of G Captain. Suez Canal revenue hits record $5.84 billion. So this story came out. How much does the Suez Canal make each year? Egypt's Suez Canal revenue rose to a record $5.84 billion in its 2020-21 fiscal year, financial year, from July to June, up from $5.72 billion the previous year. So they had an increase. Even though they were closed for 6 days, they made more money. However, got to be careful about this. The initial expansion done in 2015 that made the canal bigger, that allowed vessels like Ever Given in, was supposed to be generating in excess of $12 billion a year. This canal is not making the money they thought they were making. It's one of the reasons why they wanted to extract some money from Ever Given's owners and operating companies. They are not making the money they thought they'd make. They spent $8 billion, $4 billion on the canal widening back in 2015. The other $4 billion were for tunnels and bridges for road traffic above and below the canal. It goes on to here. This really talks about it. The number of ships that passed through the Suez Canal increased the first half of 2021 to 9,763 vessels compared to 9,546 during the same period last year. Again, not a huge increase. Talking about maybe 52 ships a year. Again, they were hoping to get that number up to 90 ships a year. They were hoping to get it up. One of the things that they did with the expansion and the widening back in 2015 was allow convoys to be happening both northbound and southbound at the same time. The problem is when they widened the canal, they allowed bigger vessels in. And so now the expansion of vessels like Ever Given and the ultra large container ships has taken hold. And now you don't have to send as many vessels through, you send larger and larger ships. They're talking about widening the canal again, making it larger. The question is, will the Suez limit the size of vessels? If they don't, we can conceivably see the same thing happen again. So this has been an amazing story to follow. It's not done yet, I don't think. I don't think this is going to be my final edition of what's going on in the Suez, because I have a feeling that something else will happen here. But if you want to go back and take a look at what happened here, let me give you two things to look at. Number one, Popular Mechanics did a great kind of minute by minute breakdown. They also did, I also had a link to the earlier one that Bloomberg did, which is a great one in one of my earlier videos. Here's the minute by minute breakdown of the Ever Given's crash. Love that image right there from a satellite from orbit. Just amazing ability to get that imagery right there. There's our bow rammed into Asia, excuse me, and our stern perched up here on Africa. Just get you the idea of how deadly this incident was. Goes in here, talks about the full details about it, talks about the sandstorm, the wind, getting the ship out, talking about the rise of the moon, the tides right there for it. Too much speed, talks about the idea of ship squat and suction, how she gets in there, the bank effect in full force right there. With my buddy, the little digger right there. There he is digging away right there. Gotta love him, and the millions of memes that came out, the grounding it involved, and everything associated with it. And again, if you enjoy the story, I recommend it. I'll have it in the show notes. The other thing to do is go back and look at some videos I did on this. I started doing this right from the very beginning. I think in one of my first videos right here was myself and John Conrad from G Captain. We did this on March 24th, so just a few days, a day after the incident took place. He and I did a series of videos where we were talking about this. We actually brought in Nick Sloan, who'd done the salvage on Costa Concordia, to talk about it. And then I started breaking down some more. We talked about what is an ultra large container ship. We talked about the freeing of the vessel, which was a huge event. That there was a couple of videos that day going on there. We kind of recapped what happened in the Suez there. And then I started my breakdown on talking about more. We talked about container ships and the container ship industry. We talked about Ever Given and what could have happened there. We talk about the idea of bad fuel, which is a big issue going on since IMO 2020. We talked about the request by Egypt initially for $1 billion. We also talked about the expansion of container ships into the ultra large container ships. We talked about insurance. We talked about the alarm being set by Maersk on what the impact of the 6-day closure was going to be, and the fact that Egypt got himself a new dredge shortly thereafter. We talked about the international aspects of shipping. We started to morph into new topics. We talked about the backlog in LA and Los Angeles. We talked about the ship being stuck in the canal and the fate of the crew. We found out about the gnomes, the poor gnomes stuck on the vessel. These were the gnomes that were heading to England that were not going to be there. And one of the big ones I want to talk about here is that what's going on, the Suez retracing Ever Given. That's the one where we looked at the 2D and the 3D map and really went into details about it. And there's a whole litany of these videos I did on the Ever Given, including where it almost happened again with the Maersk Emerald, the details we got about the master of the Ever Given, what was going on during that time, and then now the final release of the vessel. So again, feel free, go back in, take a look at some of the videos. There's also videos I'm doing now on just what's going on with shipping in general. We talked about the fire eye in the Gulf of Mexico, talked about the collision that just took place in the Straits of Malacca, and I got a video coming out here very shortly that looked at the explosion that happened this past week in Jebel Ali in the United Arab Emirates on board a container ship. And again, as events happen, we'll be broadcasting and coming up with videos to kind of break these things down and give you some insight into the shipping industry, something that you may not be very familiar with, or maybe you are very familiar with, but again, to let people know about it, because again, it's an invisible industry. Not a lot of people know anything about it beyond the fact that ships move cargo, but we don't know exactly how it's done. So if you enjoyed this, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so that when new videos come out, you'll be alerted about it. Give it a thumbs up because that shares it across YouTube for other people to do it. Feel free to share it across social media, whatever platform you happen to use. Go ahead and share it. Let everybody know about it. The more people who know about it, the more reach we have and the more exposure, which is always great for me. And if you got questions, feel free, put them in the comments. I will put all the links into the show notes for you. And I will see you shortly in the next episode of What's Going On with Shipping. Hopefully, not with the Suez, but can never tell. Till next episode, this is Sal signing off.